Hello everyone and welcome back to Eurofever Garage. As always, I'm your host Donovan and welcome to 2025. Now that kind of sounds a little bit weird going into February, but this is the first video that I'll be posting for Project Stella in regards to getting ready for an event called TexFest. Something that we have here in Texas, fairly close to me within a couple hours, outside in West Texas, where classic BMW guys, enthusiasts of all kinds, go out for about a weekend, talk to each other about their cars, and hand out awards, so on and so forth. Essentially, think of it as a glorified cars and coffee, but for classic BMWs. This will be the first time I'm going to try and go. I learned about this a few years ago with Garrett. He wanted to enter his car, which we've never really officially entered on the channel because all my videos are just sitting in a limbo, but essentially he has a older 7 Series, a E38 735 that we wanted to not submit, but go to the event in that car. That project has sort of stalled, and so I'm taking the reins here and hopefully gonna go with Stella. So while that event is sort of the goal, there hasn't been any details for the 2025 event yet, so I'm not gonna talk about it too much here, but just know that I'm planning to do a pretty decent restoration. I've been wanting to do some work on this car for quite some time, but I didn't want to dump a whole lot of money into it because, again, I'm spread pretty thin across a few different cars and I wanted to do it right and kind of do it spread over a span of 6 to 8 months. So basically, we're starting here. We're starting very simple today. This isn't going to be a full in-depth DIY, but I'm going to be doing a very quick oil change on Stella. This will be the third one I've done since owning the car. Normally, I do about 6 to 8 months or 3,500 miles on the oil changes, but with both Bella and Stella, my F32 and E38, I'm not driving them that much. So I can kind of extend that interval a little bit longer. I did the F32 not too long ago, and honestly, it was still pretty cold. And I was after, I want to say 2,000 miles and maybe about a year of usage, 8 months. So I can definitely lengthen out the intervals of just checking for condensation, making sure everything is in tip-top shape. So on top of doing the oil change, I've got some new Blackstone Laboratories test kits that I ordered. So we're going to do the first oil condition test as well to see the health of the engine. So with that being said, let's get out all the parts and tools needed to work on this M73 V12.
All right, so parts-wise, it's pretty simple. I've just got 8 quarts of oil as well as the oil filter with the corresponding O-ring and drain plug crush washer. I needed to replace my drain plug as well because the last one got stripped. It is a 17mm socket or a 6mm hex. Aside from that, it's your typical stuff: hand tools, sockets, lighting, rhino ramps if you need them, jack stands, as well as a tub to collect all the oil.
All right, so now the car is on my Rhino ramps. These are what I typically use anytime I'm doing a very simple job, whether it be an oil change, literally just looking underneath the car. I've got wheel chocks in the back because if you didn't see, I didn't realize my parking brake was so weak. I'm gonna have to adjust the rear parking brake because it was actually sliding when I activated the parking brake. So as I was going up the ramp, I wanted to make sure I was aligned correctly, and if you saw, it started to slide back. Now I knew that was an issue before, I just didn't know to what extent because I typically don't park on a lot of high incline places, and even when I do, I put the parking brake on like I normally do, and it doesn't normally slide, so this must be a pretty aggressive angle to what the car can hold. So I did the brakes in the past year or so. I didn't touch the handbrake, so I might have to adjust that a little bit to be a little bit tighter. At this point, we are ready to actually go underneath the car, so I'm gonna get changed. I'm gonna put my coveralls on. This is a good point to also mention any sort of disposable gloves, cardboard you could put underneath in case you make a mess, and then of course the drain pan that we're going to actually drain the oil into. Again, the very basics of what you need here is just a tub to collect the fluids in. I have a couple extra bits and pieces I'll show you here in a second for under the hood. Once I actually have the hood up and raised, I like to lock it down. I like to put these little curtains on the edges of the hood so I don't scratch the paint, and then just prepare myself for, and then of course put the light bars that I mentioned earlier as well around, so I've got good lighting not only for me, but for you as well. So with that being said, I will stop yapping here and let's get to it. Alrighty, well, in front of me is the heart and soul of so many excellent cars that BMW has made in the past. This is the M73N variant. The facelift N stands for never buy this unless you absolutely have to, because otherwise you're going to be buying a $700 water-cooled alternator. That is from unofficial sources. I've been told otherwise. The N doesn't really stand for anything other than the Germans. I don't know. So in any case, like I mentioned, the base of this is the M73, very similar to the M70 from the E32 previously. It is a very mechanical engine. It is 2 6-cylinders slapped together. I believe the code was the M20 from the E36 3 Series generation. Essentially, there are 2 of everything: 2 DMEs, 2 airboxes, 2 masts, 2 banks, 2 sets of ignition wires, and so on. And while it sounds like everything is a duplicate here, the only thing it has one of is a singular drive to make you go bankrupt. Now, with all that being said, I love this car. There's absolutely no problem in the world that I have with this. Would I daily it? Probably not. As I mentioned in the previous video introducing Stella, realistically, it makes no sense. It's supposed to be a collector's car at this point. From my perspective, I want this car to last a lifetime. And I mean mine, not the car's. The steps today are very simple to do an oil change. I always like to start with the oil filter. Some very basic prep work needed done is just let the car dry for about 5 to 10 minutes. I like to get it warm, but not too hot to the touch. So the oil should be nice and hot and viscous once it drains out. You should always remember to do before you drain it is open up the filler cap up top. Let's start over here and get this oil change started. Alrighty, so with me I've got some basic tools. As I mentioned, you're going to need a ratchet of some sort and then a cap or socket style removal tool. So this is the one I use for the 1 Series and the 7, the F32. So I typically think it's too big. This is a 16 flute, 86 millimeter. So if you typically have these tools, it won't work. Instead of using this, if you're watching Shretton, I think that you're trying to still find the person that switched your V12 to LPG. In any case, don't use this. This is too, for this one, you're going to want to use a 36 millimeter socket. Just put it right here. And then this is a half drive, so I've got a half drive socket. I'm going to put it on here. We're just going to very slowly crank it, because if you are like me, those stands are not very good, the little rubber mounts. So what I like to do is kind of put my hand here and crank it with the opposite hand. So I give it some leverage like this and just very slowly. Basically what I'm trying to do is prevent the rubber isolation tubes like I was mentioning and focus on keeping it as still as possible. So we've already loosened it up a little bit. I'm gonna keep going. As you can see, it's starting to move a little bit. And I can hear it already starting to flow down. We've released that cap where the filter engages. I'm gonna let that drain here for a moment. These are the heater core valves, if I recall. They're fairly flexible. It's mounted to a bracket here. These actually can be released. So definitely a little bit of condensation built up. I kind of was wiping it around here, but as you can see, that's definitely not blown head gasket, as I say copiously. But I honestly don't dry this car enough and probably don't warm it up as much as I need to. So very glad we're doing this. Again, we're doing this for the sake of the health of the car, making sure that everything is tip-top shape. Otherwise, nothing here looks crazy. Looks really, really good. Oil color-wise, I'm seeing a little bit of the MOS2 additive that I added before. And then of course, we're gonna go through the filter here in a moment to actually inspect any metal as well as what else it filtered out. Got the old filter, we're gonna pull it out and we're going to inspect it for anything crazy. Definitely doing its job. We're seeing a lot of very, very tiny contaminants, but nothing metal, just a little bit of dirt. Yep, looking like it's doing its job. Again, I don't know how much you can see, but it's just general debris. And I say debris very, very lightly. So, in any case, good to do an inspection here like we're doing here today. Now at this point, we're going to take off this little gasket here. And then we've got our new filter as well as drain plug crush washer. And for any time you put that gasket on, or the O-ring, you're going to want to lube it up with just a little bit of oil. So I always like to get just a dip of that new fresh oil, go around. Then I'm going to grab our new filter, push it in, just like that. So now that this is all prepped, let's get under the car and empty the oil. Alrighty, so we're draining the oil now, and I've got the oil sample here, as well as the old drain plug. So I believe at some point this was replaced, if I recall. I can't exactly remember the situation, but as you can see, new one looks much, much better. This one had been stripped during my trying to take it out last time. Fortunately, it had just enough grip for my 17 mil to work rather than my Allen or my M hex key. So in any case, you know, there's easier ways to get this out if you're stripped. But in any case, I ordered a new one. This is from Fevi Bilstein. The same OE style, 17 millimeter. I believe it was a 6 or an 8 mil hex here in the middle. I'll double check that in a second. But new crush washer going in, and we will refill the oil. All right, to finish this off, plain and simple, you need some oil, and for me in particular, I like using MOS2 anti-friction additive. Just gives you a little bit extra protection. 300 milliliters is sufficient for 3 to 6 liters. We're putting in 8. Again, it's less than what is probably needed, but it still adds some extra protection. The oil I always like to go with is 5W40. With how hot it gets here in Texas, the extra thickness, as minuscule as it might be over 5W30, really does help with keeping the internals properly lubricated. And again, just making sure there's enough protection for a long life. One thing I like to do as well is pour just enough to get things going to the bottom, and then stop to double check that my drain plug is properly seated. And we're looking good. And then since we are basically done, what I'm going to do at this point is pour the MOS2 additive in between. Now at this point, this is quart 7 of 8, so I'm going to put this last one in here, and then for the last quart, I'm going to put it directly in the oil filter housing to prime it. Oil filter housing we're going to prime with the last quart, and then anything that doesn't fit I will just put into the main area. That should be good. I want to overfill so we don't spill out. So at this point, oil filter goes on. Move these hoses out the way, and always like to hand tighten first, to avoid letting the O-ring bind, to prevent the O-ring from binding. All right, so it's at a stop, so I'm gonna give it just a touch. That's usually about 25 Newton meters. I'm gonna give it a good push though. And I'm gonna pour the rest of this oil into the main compartment. Last step. Put the cap back on, clean your mess. From here, I'm going to check the level of the oil with our handy dandy dipstick. Now we are at an incline, so it might be a little off, but looking just right. It's at this point that I'm going to do some final look arounds, just make sure that my mess is cleaned, make sure that there's no leaks. Anything that I looked over, last thing I have to do over there is to put the nuts back on. But other than that, now it's time to reset the oil service indicator light. I don't have one on, it's just you can reset it, show you how to do that, as well as the proper procedure to filling out the oil test kit sample for Blackstone nitrates. So let's get to finishing up this and we'll head inside.
So in order to start this procedure, just start by sticking your key in the ignition and hold the trip odometer. Next, turn your key to position 1, not ignition, and you'll see this reset light come on. Let go and then hold again until the reset flashes and it'll switch to N. From that point, take out your key, stick it back in, put it back in ignition, and as you can see here, all the bars are lit up.
Alrighty, so you've collected your first Blackstone Laboratories oil sample. Well, what do you do next? I'm going to fill out this form here real quick for you guys to kind of see what that looks like. I grabbed my transmission fluid from the G12 that I'm sending in for analysis so you can kind of see what the end product looks like. So this is basically what it looks like. Once you've finished here, there's this piece of paper that you're going to fill out with the information that you want to add. That's what we're going to go over here in a moment. And then once that's done, you put the sample inside the prepaid label bag. You're going to seal this up and you're just going to take it to your local UPS, USPS. It's already covered. The only thing you're paying for at this point is the sample test itself. Recently, they increased the pricing of the tests from $35 to $40. Not the end of the world. I'm okay with it. So you've got your sample. How do you prepare it? Inside the container, once you've already taken out the sample, you will have a protection, which I like to use to wrap up the sample beforehand rather than on the outside in case it leaks, because it'll just leak straight into this. Obviously, make sure your cap is tight, but you're going to take your sample, then your bag, and you're going to throw that inside, like so. And then at this point, you'll see a basic form fill for what you need to enter your oil-wise for your oil. So we had 102.548 miles. Throw it in the container. Might as well. Gonna let all this air out so it's nice and compact. Seal that up. And then at this point, I'm not going to show you the other side. I will just show you the front where you actually put any information that you need. So you can read this yourself. Basically, Was the oil changed? Otherwise, the answer would be no, you just took it whenever you needed an oil sample. Are you interested in extended oil use? I guess that's if you are doing longer intervals, whatever. I always check no. Last one is any additives. So of course, for me, it's a yes because I used Liqui Moly's MOS2 additive. And then for comments, questions, or extra tests, you would add if you want a TBN test for the level of additives left. Obviously, you add here what additives you did use. And then on the other side, I have my information blocked off here, but you would add your engine make and model, your year, make, and model. And then for unit ID, I use the name of my cars. So this is Stella, my sample date, how many miles were on the oil. If you're doing this regularly, you just subtract the mileage from today, from your oil change to the previous oil change, how many miles there are on the engine, did you add any oil between oil changes, as well as the oil type. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna fill out the information here. With that being said, let's move on to the drive and close out this video. There is no better place than the inside of an E38, and there's no better place than my E38 that I'd rather be. I hope you all learned something today. As I keep harking on, an oil change is one of the simplest things you can do for a car, and at the end of the day, it allows you to really understand how your car works, functions, and the overall condition of it. So with all that being said, thank you for watching till the end. Thank you for joining me. And as always, I'm your host, Donovan. Thank you for watching the Euro Fever Garage. Until next time.